Welcome to the quiet little corner of YouTube called Brother Owl's Garden. I'm Brian, and I honor your presence here today. And we're blessed again today by another visit from a wonderfully luminous soul, Kiara Windrider from India, joining us. How are you, brother?
Oh, great, wonderful.
I
Good to
can sense an invigorated, refreshed energy from you tonight, right away.
Well, there's been a lot happening internally, not so
Mm.
much externally. But I
Well, then
think
the
it's in
external will be
resonance with,
smooth.
yeah, well, there's so much going on the planet right now. So I
Yeah.
think it's also a response to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything affects everything, and
Mm,
as you and our viewers well know, as a general blanket statement, everything that's appearing and happening externally on the outside is a reflection, manifestation, or projection of what's going on the inside. So I'm sure that that's the case with you now too.
absolutely.
Kiara, I wanted to present the topic to our viewers today about death and rebirth. And I mean this in many contexts, but specifically spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, um, particularly. And of course, there's there's different ways, different forms that occurs in our lives. Um, I'm sure you've experienced a bunch of them. I know I have, and I know many of our viewers have, or may be experiencing it right now. And so let's roll with the
Mm.
topic of death and rebirth. What do you got?
Oh, well, there's so much wrapped inside this.
Yeah. Well, let's say how does how does one interpret that they have entered into a kind of a death? Now, I want to make it clear that what we're talking about is the end of one phase, chapter, matrix, template, way of being, identity, life, life chapter, that kind of thing has ended, but also some part of us. Let me rephrase that. Something within us that we used to identify with or even identify by is crumbling and falling away because it has run its course, or we have transcended its usefulness, or it isn't and never was us or ours. Let's
Well,
start.
Brian, when you say it like that, what else needs to be said?
Yeah. Well, we've got the dark night of the soul. San
Mm,
Juan de la Cruz
yeah.
is famous for coining that phrase, dark night of the soul. I also like to call it a cocooning period. But okay, so I'll share with you something that I went through amongst many. I remember there was a period in my life a few years back when I realized, like, I'm not this anymore. And this all isn't working anymore. And so I aspired to reach and live and be the highest possible version of me that is possible, that is even conceivable. And I was kind of pressing with that, like I'm serious. I want everything that's in the way of that to be gone. And I prayed for that. I prayed that everything that is holding me back, whether it's unawareness, ignorance, old habits, conditioning, belief systems, whatever I was holding on to or that was holding on to me, would fall off of me, fall away from me and be gone so that I could be the absolute most polished gem and polished mirror version of me that is possible. Of course, here and now as I am now, that kind of thing. And and even better.
Mm,
And wow, was there a response? And what I will say is that decades of very powerful conditioning and programming, especially with regard to belief systems, uh, theology, doctrine, dogma. You have to do this, you can't do that. If you do this, you're that. If you don't do this, you're that. All this kind of, you know what I mean? Institutionalization stuff, mostly centered around of a religious nature, began to creak and crack and crumble off of me. And it was scary because at that point in my life, here I am praying, praying to God for help to break through and be the absolute highest that is possible. And I know that that's a process and it continues, but I was tired of being down in the level that I had been functioning at. And all of a sudden, well, first thing is let's peel this husk of religious institutionalized spirituality, religious conditioning. Let's peel that right off of you real nice first. And that's scary because with that is, oh, but this very belief system is telling me that I can't do that. And that if I do that, I'm in grave danger. And so the reality was where I was functioning then, it was rather alarming. And I just that's not right to say eased. I took small steps through it with constant discernment, connectivity, and guidance to the best that I was able to receive within. And that old version of me died. There was a mini death. That was a death. It was a death of an old consciousness. And it was scary and it was transitional, but it was also transformative and transfigurative. That's just one of many I could offer. But I mean this kind of thing. How do we know that we've entered it? How should we be through it? And what awaits on the other side? That kind of thing.
Yeah. When you mentioned the dark night of the soul, which is the phrase coined by St. John of the Cross, sometimes people tend to romanticize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, it's going to be, it's like you have preconceived ideas of what it means. So you get on the other side and then you're reborn, you become a butterfly, you're different and you're reborn. But it's not going to look like that when you're actually going through it. It's not going to be a romantic journey of, celebrating your freedom. That may happen at the end of the journey once you're on the other side. But when you're in the midst of it, it's always going to feel like death. It's always going to feel like death on all levels. And then you come to a point where you're okay with it. Where death doesn't have to be suffering, pain, sadness, grief, hopelessness, despair. It can be also a celebration, but that's when you're giving up an idea of what death should look like. Mm-hmm. And when you're ready to dive into the dissolution of the old shell and ready to embrace that as if you're reborn every single day.
Yeah.
The Zen monks talk about beginner's mind.
You're right.
Every moment is new. You're not carrying the conditioning of the past. You're not carrying habit patterns. And what makes us human often is those habit patterns, that conditioning, those memories, the ideas. And that eventually comes a stage when every new idea becomes old, where every new step becomes something to discard. I remember the days when I was young, I'd go hiking in the mountains every weekend I could find, and carrying these heavy backpacks around. And humans are the only animals on this planet that carry heavy backpacks around. Who else does? You
Pack
know,
mules.
well, that's imposed on them. And maybe that's their service to
Not
humanity.
naturally and of their own accord. No.
No. And these heavy backpacks become an identity
Yeah. Yeah.
and they become a security.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm carrying this backpack because um, I'm not adept with just surviving in the wilderness um, with the treasures all around me, like a
Mhm.
gazelle or like a lion or like
Yeah.
any animal
Yeah.
that has learned
Yeah.
to survive in the wilderness or in the ocean.
And
Imagine whales carrying backpacks with them.
you remind
You know,
me when Yeshua sent out the disciples to teach the gospel to everybody, he instructed them very implicitly, which is also in
mhm,
line with the Buddhist tradition.
right.
Go out with nothing but the shirt on your back and the sandals on your feet. Don't carry money. Don't plan ahead. Don't try to budget for future.
Mm,
Live in absolute, what we would call flow state,
yeah,
trust that
yeah.
all that you need will be provided to you in the moment that you need it. That's it. They didn't have a caravan with packed up camels and everything else. And, you see all these, you know, uh, steamer trunks full of
Mm,
things for people going on safaris to Africa. That's sort of a cliche with old movies of that kind. And it was just, oh my gosh, you're trying to bring your world to that world around you, like a
yeah.
bubble of your world to that world. But he instructed the extreme opposite: just go free as you are.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
know,
and then he pointed to the birds in the field or the
right,
birds in the air, lilies in the field.
right.
You know, the Father
Exactly.
always provides everything they need in each
Yep.
moment,
In the moment
not
you need
before,
it.
not after, but in that moment.
Right.
And that's, if we could live in that flow state, we wouldn't need to go through the dark night ever, because
Mm,
the dark night is holding on to the familiar, is holding on to what has served us in the past, whether it's possessions, whether it's security, whether it's relationships, whether it's ideas, whether it's things that we've learned to depend on, you know. So for us, it also includes at this time, because we're going through a collective shift, it also includes in this time um, ideas of what an old political, economic, social, environmental system has looked like.
yeah.
Because we are on a journey right now. We're
Mhm.
travelers.
Sure.
We're travelers in every possible um, meaning
Hmm.
that we can give it.
Hmm.
We're travelers in these forms, in these human bodies. We don't belong here
Yeah.
on this planet forever. We only happen to be traveling through,
Yeah.
given everything we need.
Yeah.
And as when we come into this world as a child, we surrender. We are in total surrender. Um, our families take care of us, support us. Mother Earth holds us, carries us. And if we can stay in that state of surrender and flow,
Exactly.
we don't need to build up something that then becomes an addiction,
Yeah.
becomes
Yeah.
a security blanket. But
Yeah.
that's incredibly hard for
I agree,
civilized
but I think you're
humans.
spot on because as you were saying that, I was thinking if we can manage to stay in it, and there's your word, you just said it. You know,
Mm,
you always make me remember things and I relate them, quotes or images. Um, I remember one with a Sufi master, whether he was a fakir or what, I don't remember, but Sufi master
mm,
received, you know, a, a civilian man that wanted to begin to study under him, and he received him in his home. Of course, it was very, very uh, simple. You might even say, from a worldly view, it was empty. There
mm,
wasn't hardly anything in it, and so the man enters the Sufi master's home, and he says, "Do this is your home? Yes. Why don't you have furniture? And you don't have any furniture." And he says, "Well, I'm just a guest here." And he says, I'm messing up the story so terribly. I'm sorry, but he said, if this is where you live, why don't you have any furniture and things? He says, well, I'm just a guest here. And the point is that we're all just guests. By the way, I butchered that story worse than any I've ever told. But the point is that he's just a guest traveling through, just passing through. And he had been living at a level that was beyond the fear-based, mistrust-based, disconnection-based urge to collect and accumulate lots and lots and more, and then encase yourself and surround yourself in it so that you somehow feel safer, which in the end you don't. It's a perpetual loop. It's never
Right.
enough and all that. But yeah, if we can
So the
remain
big
in that
question,
transcendent.
so that's the big question, isn't it? If we can remain
Yeah.
in that state, which, because you're so socialized,
Mm,
we have a very difficult time with.
yeah.
Um, unless we're deliberately choosing to let go, to surrender moment by moment, trust, and then learn that it's okay to trust. It's okay to let go,
Yeah.
that everything is provided as it's needed.
And
But,
when we fall off
it's
track, get back on.
get back
Fall
on.
down 7 times, get up 8. Japanese proverb,
Yeah.
that kind of
So
thing.
this whole process of letting go,
Mhm.
it's also a process of dying. And when I say dying, most people will see or hear death as something gloomy. But it can be, because the letting go can be tearful and fearful. Um, but it doesn't have to be. You know, I started speaking as a traveler on this earth, and I've lived much of my life as a traveler. And what happens as a in that travel mode, um, it just becomes easier to let go of where
Right.
you are, knowing that the next step is going to be just as beautiful. You're going to meet people along the way
Yeah.
that are just as incredible.
Yeah.
You're going to have opportunities and experiences that are just as amazing as ever before. And once you learn that you can trust that, then traveling becomes a joy.
Yeah. The Son
And
of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He
yeah,
he he didn't have a house,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yet he had a place offered to sleep every night,
Every
but
night.
he didn't keep a house kind of thing. In other words, he didn't
Right.
lock into the ownership thing.
And that's been true in my own life. I've lived um, 1,000 different places.
Can you share
Um,
with us, Kiara, just maybe one um, very meaningful example of, see, when we're talking about a death, as you said, it doesn't have to be gloomy, and we're not talking,
mm,
I'd like to clarify that in case it's not obvious. We're not speaking of you ending. We're speaking of some pattern or some consciousness or
mm,
some habitual old way of being and seeing has run its course, no longer serves you, is collapsing and peeling off of you. It isn't you. You are endless, timeless. You always are the I am, the is.
mm.
That it's
Right.
the aspects that we've got, that we've held on to or that have stuck to us. The barnacles are peeling off. They're not you. But it can
Yeah.
be, as I mentioned, scary, and as you mentioned, it could even be sad sometimes because of attachment and familiarity. But is there a certain incidents in your life that you'd like to share regarding this? Because I know you're very deep
Yeah.
in
Well,
experience.
I remember as a teenager, the first time I read Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda Paramahamsa, which I'm sure many people
Mhm.
listening have
It's a must read.
also read. Yeah. And, I was just fascinated by all these stories of sadhus and yogis living in the caves and mountaintops and just living such a rich and simple life in total trust and power. It's like that power that comes from surrender, that comes from letting go of the known. And I said, okay, this is it for me. I'm going to do it. And
About how old were you at that time, Kiara?
maybe 16,
That young. That's
16,
unusual. It
17.
usually comes mid-20s or 30s. Yeah, great.
Mm. So, I just finished school. Well, maybe it was 18, 17, 18. And I decided I was going to go off into the mountains in the Himalayas. And my parents gave me some money. Um, and looking back, I'm just amazed that they could allow me that experience. How many parents would be willing to do that?
You sound
Just
like Paramansa's cousin who tried to sneak or did sneak onto the train and all that. If our
right.
viewers have read Autobiography of a Yogi, if not, read it now. Life-changingly great book.
Yeah.
You remind me of his cousin when they got together on the train and their
Mm,
stories of
mm.
attempting to get off into which eventually they found their way to where they belong.
Eventually, there is. So what happened with me is like, I wanted to test out what Yogananda was um, describing. So if I'm not going to be holding on to an idea of security, what does it mean to let go?
Mhm,
And so I had some money that my parents had given me
mhm.
for the trip. And I told them, well, I'll come back when I come back. I don't know when it will be, but just trust that I'll
Right.
be okay. And so I left. I found this place, and I happened to be in a church. And I said, okay, this is an opportunity. And the offering box was being passed around at the end of the service. So I put everything I had into the box. I didn't even think about, okay, where am I going to go next? How am I going to get there? It was like, okay, let me test this out. And next thing I knew, the pastor invited me to his home for dinner. And he said to me, he asked me about my life and where I was going and what I was up to, and my thoughts and feelings and interests. And we had a really good rapport. And at the end, he said, someone slipped this incredible amount of money in the offering box. And I don't know who it was, but I think you should have it. And so he gave me the money I'd put in plus more, which allowed me then to go on to wherever I was being called next. And that's happened over and over and over again. And what I'm reminded of is that when you are willing to trust the universe always gives back. But that starts with giving and then receiving. Many people are um, hold on to this idea of receiving. So there's all this
Yeah.
thing about the law of attraction,
Mhm.
for instance. It's like I'm going to manifest what I need. Well, before you manifest, you first open, offer, surrender, trust. Then the manifestation comes in tenfold. But it's not coming from some kind of mental gymnastics that I'm creating
No,
that's like a scheme that gives me what I need. It's more like I see myself as a traveler. I trust that as a traveler, I'm given everything I need. And that served me well in all my journeys,
of
whatever I've
course,
put my mind to.
of course.
Um,
And I
I've
have to
lived,
tell you, Kiara, that um, you very deeply touched my heart with that story, and I'd like your permission for me to share that with people from time to time when it's
oh,
appropriate.
sure, 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 of
I think
course.
it's one of the most beautiful stories I've ever heard. It's also one of the most perfect examples of this divine principle, this cosmic principle of the way, the natural law. We are so conditioned on this earth, in this species, in this society. Um, I need to get mine. And it
Mm,
has to be more and better and newer than yours all the time. And there's the rat race. And we're programmed to be mindless, conformist slave consumers, as an aside note to that. But isn't it funny how, as we talked about in a previous episode, how, as above, so below, this world is a reflection, but it's an inverse in so many. We've made it an inverse in so many ways by our own doing. We the the pressure is to believe that seeing is believing, but in fact, believing allows seeing. And isn't it ironic that in a world where it's bludgeoned into us, get more, get better, get newer, get more, have more. It's all that message everywhere. Consume, own, get. And it is the exact opposite flow and
Mm.
direction that the world was intended and made to be lived out, which is give thought. When I say thoughtlessly, I mean without thinking it over and hesitating too much.
Mm.
Give freely and of a joyful heart. If somebody asks you for your shirt, give him the coat off your back too. All this kind of stuff. If somebody asks you for an apple, give him the whole tree. This kind of thing. And also without being asked is even
Mm.
more joyful. I would say personally, but when asked, give more than asked, and don't worry about, well, I've got 10 and you're asking me for 8. If I give you 8, I only have 2. Okay, you've derailed the whole thing. Give them the 10, because it's not gambling with fate. It's living and demonstrating your absolute knowledge that you are completely and timelessly plugged into source. All is, I am God. Call it what you like to call it.
You're not just plugged into source, you are source.
You are, yeah, you cannot be disconnected from. Okay, is what I mean to say by that.
Mm.
You cannot be disconnected from. You can look the other way and and act as if you're disconnected and then create that reality, but you're not disconnected. You are it. It's flowing through you. Everything. I just did a video posted on Sunday. It's already yours. It's already yours. Everything that we're grasping and yearning, and I gotta get it, and then I'm gonna be at peace, and then I'm gonna be able to rest, and then I'm gonna have enough, and then I'll be happy. Okay, it's all yours anyway. You, you know, and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I love that. I love that story that demonstrates that you just shared with us more than I can even express. It got me a little welled up.
Mm.
And I think that we can all relate on some level or another to having had some kind of that experience. And I would like to say boldly that I almost want to say I dare you to our viewers, but I don't mean to speak harshly. I challenge you. I invite you to boldly break through that last layer of
Mm.
hesitation, fear, doubt, mistrust, distrust. I don't know. I better not. Let me intellectually analyze this and weasel my way out of it. I invite you to
Well,
break
I
through it.
would add to this. Um, it's not about testing the universe.
Nope.
What it's about is following your inner flow.
Yeah.
The Inca uh, teachings talk about Aini, which is the word they use for flow. And what
How
they
do you
say
spell that, Kiara? That
is
word?
Ayni, Aini. So what they say about Aini is that this is the law of the universe. The universe is flow. And so if you're in the flow, you don't accumulate um, hucha, which is the term for resistance, separation,
Oh.
uh, tightness, fear, um, inner um, fragmentation. This is an outcome. Hucha is an outcome of not surrendering to the flow of the universe. It takes some practice learning how to surrender, and they start with energy practices. to learn how to do so. But once you learn how to do so, it's so liberating. And it's not just possessions. Possessions is the least of it. It's ideas, it's the mind, it's the memories, it's the ideologies that make us what we think we are. Whether it's religious stuff, whether it's political stuff, whether it's um, human identity, this like memories of this Kiara personality that accumulates over a lifetime of being alive on this earth. I'm remembering a story of a friend of mine who was in Pondicherry. She was a French lady, and she was called there by the mother in Sri Aurobindo. And one day she was out for a swim in the ocean, and she was a good swimmer, but the tide took her out. And despite being a good swimmer, the rip current was so strong that she couldn't get back to shore. And it took her hours, literally hours, to finally make it back to shore. And when she got back, she had no memory of anything. She didn't know who she was. Um, there's no sense of even, well, people talk about amnesia and things like that. This was more than amnesia, even, because this was not even realizing that I'm attached to this human identity. There was just this sense of presence and being one with everything. And she was in a state of ecstasy. And she lived that way for an entire month. Everything she needed was offered. And then the police finally found her. And they said, because they were wondering who is this lady who suddenly just appeared, and does she have an identity? They found her passport, and they showed her the passport and said, "Is this you?" And the moment she saw the picture of herself on the passport, it's like her identity started to reattach as this person in this passport, the nationality, the identity, and so on. And immediately, it's like she could feel herself like coming back into this limited structure.
Yeah.
She never lost the wideness, but she also then started to feel herself confined to this identity. And she said later that to know that both can coexist was very important to her. It wasn't about just dissolving into the universe.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about being attached to an identity. It was about having both available as needed. So the mind could then expand out, and the mind could then come back in.
Yeah.
The mind could enter the cells. The mind could take one level of identity and merge into the next level of identity, and then into the next level of mind. So consciousness includes all of that. So the one of the dangers, I think, in the spiritual world is that we talk about big self and little self as if one is better and bigger than the other.
Well, as Ram Dass said, you still got to know your zip code.
Well, yes, but I'm not just the big self. And the big self is not more important than the little self. The little self is here for a purpose as an expression of the big self. And the death rebirth journey is about realizing there's no difference. So each moment you're reborn, each moment I am that and this.
I
and
love
this,
that. And
that.
I wish that I could have that replayed, what you just said. The big self and the little self are equally important. And eventually we realize they are the same. Just a plot, one is engaged and applied, I suppose. I've put a lot of
It's the same consciousness operating through different dimensions.
Like as if in different contexts, and I've put a lot of effort, or I should say intention maybe, in my own personal life and in many of the episodes that I've posted, trying to not just remind myself, and in the case of episodes, other viewers, that we are that. That's very important because
Mhm.
we the drumbeat of the consumer insane world that we live in just drums that out of we forget all the time. We forget. And so it's been so important to try to keep sight of it, to see the candle light through the storm around us. And yet, what you just said is they're both equally important. And at some point, we realize they are one and the same, just in two different dimensions. I love that because that's the next level of understanding this. Um,
Right.
and
So
so I really respect that. I love that you've
let's
shared.
go back to death and rebirth, which includes physical death
Mhm.
also. So, we become identified with the physical body while living this existence, and that's part of why we're here. But then there comes a time when we drop the body and move on, or we drop the physical body
Yeah.
and move into a more subtle expression, subtle bodies, subtle worlds,
Mhm.
equally real, but just vibrationally different. So, if the more we have learned to let go of
Yeah.
a solid um, perception of reality, the easier it becomes
Yeah.
to let go of the physical body and move on.
Incremental practice.
Um, and at the same time, it's never easy
Mhm.
I mean, when I think of my own death, no big deal. I don't have any particular attachment to one or the other reality because I know that there's no death.
Yeah.
But when it comes to someone else, and this is when it comes to being very human with human emotions. 4 months ago, my mom died. And, I'd been prepared for it for a few months. And yet, when the moment came, even though it was a very blessed moment, there was also enormous sadness. Um,
Mhm.
and there were many, many aspects of it. One aspect of which was regrets,
Yeah.
um, taking her for granted, not being able to see her for who she was fully, and then realizing afterwards, oh my God, I could have been so much more present with her. I could have given so much more.
Yeah.
Um, in my own need for self expression, I wasn't able to include her because of my ideas of freedom. And so in the last 4 months, I've been staying in her home and just going through various phases of grief and sadness, feeling the regrets, feeling her presence, and just communicating with her in ways that I couldn't have because I wasn't able to see her fully. I was seeing her through these blinders, the role that I was playing in her life, that she was playing in my life, but
Right.
not really able to see her as she is. And part of death rebirth is being able to see yourself, seeing others around you as we are, without preconceptions, without judgments, without attachments, without resistance, just as is, which is, part of the flow nature. But if you're not used to being in that flow nature, it's hard. It takes practice. And I've been going through that the last 4 months. And each time I, feel the sadness or feel the regret, it opens my heart even more. Tears come often. And
Yeah.
so part of it is like, yes, sometimes there's the regret, sometimes there's the sadness, sometimes there's grief
Yep.
about what we think we've lost.
Yeah.
And that's all part of being human. It's all to be
Yep.
respected and
Yeah.
honored.
Right.
But then as we go through it, we come into another phase. Again, like we spoke about last time, the cloud of unknowing,
Yeah.
the mystery. we enter into that mystery. And the mystery is like, it's like trust that wherever you are is perfect.
Yeah.
You don't need to know, you don't even need to understand.
No.
You just trust, because how else can it be? That's Aini in the Inca tradition. That's the ability to flow. That's when you know that you can die every single moment and be reborn, and it's safe to do so, to an old identity, to an old value system, to old perceptions of reality, to what you think the world needs to look like. Right now we're going through some pretty intense times.
Yep.
um,
I don't know anybody that's not feeling it at this
oh
point. Literally, I don't know anybody that's not
yeah,
directly in in the airstream, of what's happening. And
yeah,
there's a
yeah.
lot of people. One thing, and my viewers will know me by now. I am not the kind of person that's going to fling some kind of toxic positivity, as they call it. I'm not
Mm,
going to sugarcoat things. Some things are hard. I could use a lot of other
mm,
words, but some things are not what we would want at all. But
mm,
what I want to say regarding your experience of processing through the passing on of your beloved mother, and bless her. She, I can't imagine how deeply satisfied she is with who you are, by the way. I could just imagine that's profound. Um, but one mistake I will not make, and I would love for more and more people to stop making this mistake. I will never say, I know how you feel, especially when someone has died, etc. And you're talking to the mourner, the bereft, and you say, "Oh, I know how you feel." No, you don't. You can't, because as I have talked about before, we cannot share an experience. We can only share an event. Your experience is distinctly your own, but I can relate and empathize. Um,
mm,
some years back, my girlfriend died, and
mm.
it was by far, thought I could get through this easier. It was by far the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. We'll just let it be that, okay? And I understand what it's like to have that dropped on you. Ready or not, it happened. Now you just have to process your way through it. Or you can resist that and struggle and suffer even longer and worse. It's all, how do you want to handle this? But um, and I say this without deliberately, without judgment, without condemnation, without labeling and all that. But there are different aspects to, let's say, grieving the passing of a loved one. You mentioned very poignantly the regret. A huge portion of the grief is regret. Should have, would have, could have, wish I did. I didn't love enough. I wish I said, I wish I did. And so my suggestion for that is take care of that now, to reduce not only your pain later, but to take the satisfaction in knowing that you did proactively and expressively love as much as you possibly were able. And no matter what, you're always going to say it wasn't good enough, it wasn't enough. You're always going to feel that way. But believe me, you're going to heal faster when you know that you pretty much couldn't have done more, couldn't have done better. Okay, whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
And the
And
next part is the sense of loss. I have lost someone, something that I am familiar with, I am accustomed to, I love and know in this form. And now, even though I know that they continue to exist, that form I knew them in is gone. And that
mm,
is a shock, a jolt.
and
And
it's not just that which is gone, it's your relationship with them, though.
in
It's
that context,
in that context, because what happens is that you build an idea of yourself based on that person, based on your relationship with that person,
that's a good,
and the
yeah.
role that person has played for you.
Mm,
And there's a space in between what's happening with me, and just speaking from my own experience, is that it's been 4 or 5 months since my mom died. And what's happened since then, I haven't left this place. I haven't been able to travel. And
Yeah.
it's ironic because, my whole identity has been as a traveler.
Right.
But since then, it's like I don't want to go anywhere. I don't need to go anywhere.
Right.
Somehow it's like this space, there's a preciousness there. And until I can gather all that and make it my own, I'm not, it's not the right time
I
to move
understand.
on. When it's the right time, it'll become very clear and it'll be something different than anything else in the past. It's like,
You're just in the flow. You're not fighting it. You're not needing it to be other. You're not shoulding and ought to about, you're just flowing with what it is.
and that's the dark night. Dark doesn't have to be sad and depressing. Dark is just unknown.
Yeah.
It's like sitting with the unknown until there's a clarity inside you that says, "Okay, I'm ready to move to the next."
Yeah.
And that's incredibly painful sometimes, because we tend to want to distract ourselves sometimes by doing
Of
something,
course.
going someplace,
Most of the time.
rather than sitting with what's there,
Right.
feeling wise and thought wise, and
Yeah.
just whatever's unraveling, let it unravel.
Right.
Because you know that once it's unraveled, the universe will be ready for the next
Hmm.
layer. It always is. But sometimes that unraveling has to come first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we tend, it's like I've I'm I've lived my life in a certain way. I have accomplished certain things. I I've identified with those things that I've accomplished.
Right.
So when someone asks me, well, who are you? I tend to focus on those accomplishments, things I've done, you know. But what I'm feeling now is that none of those accomplishments mean anything much to me anymore. Whether it's things, books I've written, places I've traveled, people I've helped, none of that means much to me anymore. It's like been there, done that.
Yeah.
What's next? And it's not
Those
going to
things have
come.
run their course in your life.
Yeah.
You've
And
you've
so
come
it's
out
like
the other side of them. So
that empty space, if I try and fill it with things I know from the past, um, I'm I'm robbing myself, or I'm robbing the universe
yeah.
from what wants to unfold
Yeah.
in the next
But
um,
you're so
evolution.
supremely aware and present to that it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't last long if you strayed off of the path of,
Yeah,
you
it
wouldn't.
couldn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It would be forcing it. It's like I
Right.
can say, okay, I've been sitting in one place for 6 months. It's very unusual for me. Where do I go? So I think, okay, go here, go to Pondicherry, go to the Himalayas, go to Bali, go to Ecuador, whatever.
Mm.
And it's like nothing attracts me in those
Yeah.
places anymore. Things which in the past would have been, yes, yes, I have to do that. That was my identity. But now it's like, no. Sometime I have a feeling that when I come out of this cocooning, that things will start calling me in certain ways, different places, different events, in a whole different way. But it's not this,
No, and those things will come
this
in
aspect
due
of me.
season, just like the things before
Yeah,
this came in. There was a time when I was traveling literally on the move every single day,
right.
sometimes staying places for a day, sometimes staying places just how I felt as I traveled all through mostly Southeast Asia. I
Mm,
would stay a day, I would stay a month, I would stay in a year, I would stay 2 weeks, whatever felt like okay. And then after about 6 years of doing that, it ran its course. It's not that there's not other, I still have 4 or 5 countries I'd love to see, but that pressing urgency and it is gone.
yeah,
Because
right.
enough of it has run its course through me, or as my mother would say, you got it out of your system, so to speak.
Mm, yeah,
That it's like Um, yeah, there's a couple more places I would like to go, but I don't need to, and it's not a pressing, crucial thing for me to do it. But if it flows,
Yeah.
I'll be
If,
there, and if it's forced, I won't.
and it's not going to be for the same reasons.
Exactly. I used to do travel photography in the beginning, and I had thousands of beautiful captures. And now I don't even own a camera anymore.
Hmm.
And I don't own a phone either. I mean, I
Yeah.
have a unit that I use like to record my video, but I don't have a calling phone. I just try to, I've just shed those things.
Right.
And I don't
Right.
want to go back into needing to own them. Um, but the thought, 8, 9 years ago, that I would go anywhere without there's your backpack again. I had an entire backpack of photography equipment,
Right.
telephoto lenses, 2, 3 bodies, all this kind of, and it was a marvelous phase of my life. And the photos they're precious to me. They're priceless because they
Hmm.
are moments, captured moments of experiences that I can distribute and share with others to the extent that they are open to receiving them. But like when I went to Bhutan, I didn't even I still had a camera, but I didn't even bring it. I packed it away. And you know what? It definitely changed. As you just said, the reasons would be different. It definitely changed the focus of my experience of travel. I went there consciously to have direct experiences and be as fully present to them and in them as possible, having recognized that as lovely as the photography was, and some of them are treasures to me, the camera was a, a it created a boundary. It created an interruption between my experiencing what I was seeing,
Hmm.
for the sake of
Yeah.
capturing it. It got in the way. If you've ever seen the movie with Anthony Hopkins and Cuba Gooding Jr., it's called Instinct. And he was a scientific researcher who went to Uganda to study the gorillas. And he went there trying to get the perfect shots and all this. And then at a certain point, he realized this camera is a barrier.
Hmm.
It's limiting me. And he hung it up on a tree and let it rot in the forest. And then gradually he started to live like them, with them,
Well,
not
we
as
live in
them.
such a selfie culture
Yeah.
that our experience of reality is always separated from the actual event.
Yeah.
It's like we're so intent on somehow condensing this moment into a snapshot so we can share that with people or with ourselves later.
Yeah.
And I think about tribal cultures where there's never been a camera, and their ability to simply be present
Yeah.
with nature.
Yeah.
And in that presence, animals come to them, plants speak to them. They can be completely still. Um, they become the animal that they're tracking. So it's not even about following tracks on the ground, it's about being able to follow that creature in what the Aborigines would call um, the dream time.
Yeah.
You just become one with everything that you're
I,
experiencing.
I was
There's
thinking of the word
no
mind
separation
stream when
between.
you said that. It's the same idea, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So we can, each of us can return to that. Each of us can return to our um, origin point in that beginner's mind, that still point. Um, and it just takes a little bit of practice. But what gives us the training we need is these moments of dark nights. So, what I would suggest to people listening to this, watching this, is when those moments come, treasure them. Don't try and avoid them or push them away or somehow justify them in any way or intellectualize
Mm.
what's going on.
Yeah.
Don't try and make sense of them. It's like I'm here. This is a gift.
Yeah.
I don't need to understand. Delete that need to understand.
Yeah.
So you can be present with all of it, all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly. Whatever is up is what's up.
Yeah.
The more we embrace that, then it allows it room to change and shift and grow and expand and move into something else. No judgments. Nothing is better than anything. But it's like we're called to a path of service, deeper and deeper service, where we're moving away from the needs of the personal self to the needs of the whole, the needs of the personal um, life that we live on this earth to the needs of the earth herself. And each time we go through this dark night, we open to the next level of assimilation and
Yeah.
integration with the next layer of identity. And so it's a learning process. Death is always going to be painful and difficult, or it's not death
Mm.
until we learn to welcome it. And then every moment is beautiful. And I'm reminded always of Carlos Castaneda when he talks about keeping death as an ally at your left shoulder. It's like that reminder of death is also the reminder of your life. It's what gives you purpose and
Yeah.
meaning and spontaneity,
Yep, that's
joy.
why you see the painting of the Catholic monks holding the skull in their hand or having a skull
Mm,
on their desk while they're scribing the scriptures and all that. It's memento mori, the Stoics, memento mori, remember your mortality. You're gonna die as far as you know yourself to be in this physical form. And of course, again, to repeat, die meaning that form, that template, that familiarity, that consciousness, that old way ends, not you.
mm,
I've always been amused at okay, there's people who say, once you die, that's it. Once you die, they throw you in the ground and that's it, you're done. And they're afraid of that.
mm.
And the logic is because if when you die, that's it, what then? But the
Yeah,
conflict there is, if that's correct, there is no then, there is no you. And the reason is because you cannot experience non-existence. So if in fact we're totally wrong and there is no what we call afterlife and all that, which of course we're not wrong about that, but if we were, and once you die they throw you in the ground and that's it, well then there is no you that's
mm,
experiencing non-existence of all else, but you exist in the non-existence. That doesn't happen. So for those of us who have a fear of death, thinking like that's it, lights out, you can't experience non-existence. And also non-existence is not what waits anyway.
yeah.
After you
I'll share a
shed this
personal
body.
story. Um, when I was 20, I that I was about to leave India. I'd gotten a scholarship to study in the United States, and I fell ill. So my parents took me to this naturopathic doctor, and he called me to his office, and then he said to me, you have this terminal illness, and it scared me. And it was just about a month away from when I was supposed to leave and go back or go to the United States. And I thought about it. Well, what am I going to do? I didn't tell my parents what the doctor told me. And so I said, well, what do I do now? And I thought, well, if I don't have so much time left on this planet, I don't want to be sitting at home making my parents ill with worry. I'm just going to go have my final adventure. And that's what I did. I left. I went to the United States. I was really sick um, on the trip when I got there. Um, Finally, I went to a doctor, and he was a doctor of tropical medicine, um, and he said, "Yeah, that's mononucleosis. It's not what this other doctor had said." And he said, "Yeah, it's bad, but it's not terminal." And in 2 months, 3 months, I recovered. But the best part of that experience was um, learning to live, to know that when the time came for me to die, that there would be no regrets, that there would be no sense of, oh, I held back on my life
Yeah.
because I was afraid.
Yeah. I understand that. It's wonderful how you just, love what is. You said, okay,
Mm.
that as you said before, what's up is what's up. Well, that's what's up. My number.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if I've only got a short time left, I'm gonna continue with my intention and my desire that I was engaged with already. I'm gonna follow that out until I leave. And then twist of events turns out
Mm.
you didn't have to and all that. Um, I, something that I've, again, I don't profess to live up to all that I am aware of or the ideals that I aspire to and all that. I don't make any of those claims. I just constantly do my best to do it, and then that's it. And it's not perfect, but something that I've found, and I've shared this with friends that are like that will contact me or ask me, what should I do? I need advice about what should I do, this or the other. And I'll say, fast forward and visualize yourself on your deathbed, assuming that you will have one day. Okay, you're on your deathbed. You're looking back on your life. It is finished. You know that you're about to depart. Do the thing now that you feel will bring you the most satisfaction for having been done when you are reviewing it then. And don't look back. Do that
Mm.
one and let it be that simple and go with it.
Mm.
You have to choose A or B. Choose the one that you think will give you the most satisfaction in that life review when you're looking back on your life. Hopefully, you have the time to reflect and process that. Some people don't, but put it through that filter and see what
Yeah,
comes out.
yeah. Well, that reminds me of the studies that have been done with near-death experiences.
Mm.
And almost everyone, invariably, when they come back from a near-death experience, speak about the life review. Of course, they haven't gone all the way through it, or they wouldn't come back. But they speak about this period. It's almost like being in a movie projection room, and you
Yeah.
have the screen,
Mm.
and your entire life is flashed in front of you.
Mhm.
And what you're seeing is not something that's out there, but every experience, you're seeing it through the eyes of
Right.
every single participant. So
Right.
if there's another
You're
person with
feeling
you,
it.
so
You're feeling what
feeling
they
it,
felt,
and not just feeling what you're feeling, but feeling what the other person in
what
that
they felt.
that event was experiencing. So if you hurt someone, or if someone hurt you, you follow those threads all the way out and all the way back and all the way forward. So it's not just, you know, an event outside of yourself, like
No,
we
and you
usually
see
experience.
the impact ripples.
All the ripples.
And
Yeah,
yet I'd like to add in there that even as such, and there's going to be a lot of pain felt and a lot of bliss felt, but I think that it's important to just say, what is the lesson?
yeah, that's
Don't
it.
judge and condemn yourself for the things that you messed up and you hurt
There's
somebody.
no judgment. There's never
No,
judgment.
that isn't supposed to be part of it. That's not what it's
No.
about.
And I
It's
think
about
that's
empathy.
something that humans, the fear of death is mostly the fear of judgment.
Ah, good point.
And when we
Yeah.
know that there's no judgment and there's no one outside ourselves to judge us, we experience ourselves at one with the universe as, divine. At that point, it's like who else can judge you for any experiences you've had? It's a learning experience. I know now that I'm not going to take that person for granted. I
Yeah.
know now that I don't deliberately hurt somebody.
Mhm.
I know now that certain priorities are
Yeah.
important,
They
especially
serve as
love.
references. I remember
Yeah,
when I did that, how that felt and how that made that person feel. And okay, got it. I don't do that anymore. And
yeah,
also, I remember the time when, I got it right. And look at
right.
the wonderful impact. Look how
Mm,
many other people that impacted beyond the one I knew. And yeah,
exactly,
keep doing
exactly.
that. That was a good,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's
And we
important
don't
to
often realize the impact we have positively. We have
never.
someone just very
Never.
spontaneously. We
Yeah.
say a kind word,
Yep.
or help them at a time when they need something. And then you see the ripple effects of that. So the
Yep.
life review is also about that, seeing how it impacts on so many
Yeah.
levels. And wow, what a gift. I did that to
Mother
myself.
Teresa had a good quote that relates to this. I've probably quoted it several times before.
Mm,
We can do no great things. We can only do small things with great love.
yeah,
But that's what makes them great. See, when
right.
we cannot do some tremendous earth shaking things, but we can do small things with great love, which then is great. That's what makes them great, you know?
And that's the flow, isn't it? So you talked about the flow event, because as the Incas say, when there's Aini, the flow, there's love. In fact, it's the same. Because otherwise we tend to get caught up in the the mathematics of love. You keep score, you keep track. It's like,
Well,
am I getting more?
accounting.
Am
I
I
call
giving
that
more?
accounting. Yeah.
Counting. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just accounting. It's
Yeah.
not love. So
If you're
love is
doing
when you
something
recognize there's a flow, the giving and receiving, and you're not even looking at it as a give and take.
exactly,
It's just a flow.
because if you're we all know this, but it's a good reminder again. If you're doing something for someone with an expectation
Mm,
of any kind, even of what kind of reaction they're supposed to have, you're doing business.
yeah.
You're doing an exchange. If you're doing or giving with the expectation of some return, that's you're doing business.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
when you just freely, like you gave in the collection box,
Yeah.
boom,
My,
incredible.
my father was a Sufi, and he would say that over and over again. You don't do something because you expect thanks. You do something because you're doing something with no um,
Yeah, it's
required
free.
outcome.
It's free
And
giving,
if you're
freely giving.
focusing on the required outcome, it's not free. It's not flow. It's not love.
No, if you want to get yourself tangled into a pretzel and upset, put a lot
Mm,
of energy on expectations of how people are supposed to respond to what you do. And we all do it. I do it. But if you ever want to have just a really bad day, that's a really good way. Start projecting expectations of you should do this, you should feel that, you should respond that way. And
yeah,
you'll find it's very efficient at making you upset. So
yeah,
what I like
yeah,
to say is our part in the flow, our role, our duty, our charge in the whole system is just give. Have no concern. Don't even give any thought to what are you going to do with what I gave you. How I helped you going to please give me a full report of your progress. So forget it. Boom, done. Boom, done. Just give. Thomas Merton had a beautiful quote about that, which I'm probably going to butcher. It is not our job to decide who is worthy or unworthy of love. It is our job to love everyone.
oh,
There is no judging of it. Well, this one really deserves my love. Because it's easy to love people that are easy to love,
yeah,
but it's
mm,
not necessarily easy, but it's transfiguring
yeah,
to
yeah,
love those who may be challenging to love. And by the way, they're the ones that need it the most. As I
yeah.
say, the most difficult to love are the ones most in need of being loved. And what you're seeing is what happens when somebody isn't getting any love. It might
You know, a
you
good
might
a
blame it
good
on them, but that's the
a good
result.
practice for this is
Okay.
when you're watching a movie. I mean, life is a movie, but okay, that's the next level. But if you're watching a movie on the screen, and there's always going to be a drama, there's going to be heroes, and there's going to be villains. What if you could actually experience the villain without, you notice what's happening in you? Yes, there's going to be, resistance, there's going to be judgments, there's going to be anger, and whatever comes up in response to injustice or violence. But at the same time, you love that person as an aspect of yourself. It's good practice. It's not going to be, 100% successful. But if you can do that consciously watching a movie, Then when it comes to actually experiencing that in real life, it becomes
Yeah.
a little bit easier.
It's a good exercise.
Yeah.
And it can create miraculous, unforeseen results. Look, I believe that there is evil in the world and all that, and I'm not saying, give Satan a great big bear hug and everything's fine. I'm not saying that anyway. But if you can love someone past their junk, okay?
Mm.
We all have it, some worse than others, but we've all got it. If you can love someone past all that, okay, there's a wonderful quote. I don't know who said it, but it struck me so powerfully. I've never forgotten it when I saw it, and I keep it in there. I have not come to heal you. I've come to love you. Love will heal you.
Wow.
Whoever said that,
Beautiful.
bless you.
Mm.
I didn't have any credit for whoever said it, but it doesn't really matter who said it.
Yeah.
I have not come to heal you. I've come to love you. Love will heal you. You take a wayward kid who's, a troubled kid who is headed for jail, suicide, or being killed in their future. Love them unconditionally, no
Mm.
matter what, with all your power. Be love to them.
Yeah.
You
And
can
that's an
completely
infinite
change them.
journey. Who of us is able to fully 100% love unconditionally at all times with all people? Hardly any of us. I mean, I'm including the great Buddhas and great teachers and Christs. Not 100%, but it's a
No, people
journey.
who say it's easy aren't doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's like, yeah, it's okay. I don't have to, do it perfectly. I'm not, if I'm expecting myself to be perfect, forget it.
But
Step
Kiara,
out
I
of
would
it.
say this: where you are now in your ever blooming ascension, there
Mhm.
is someone who is at that point that would be a challenge, but that you could
Yeah.
love unconditionally as being divine love and impact them in an absolutely transformational way. And that might just happen to be right here now, and maybe in 20 more years it's over here, and maybe 15 years ago it was down there. But where you are now, who you are now, what you're vibing now, there's somebody who within that range would be very challenging for you, but you could do it, and and you might not live to see it, but you might have an impact on them that echoes in eternity. I will stand by that because it goes back to we really never know how much we've
Mhm.
impacted people.
Mhm.
It fits with that.
Uh-huh.
So I wanted to finish just one small last point. I talked about when we lose. I don't even like to say that, but when a loved one passes away, the three parts of the grieving. The first was the regret, which is the gamut. It's the biggest part of it. And the second is the sense of loss. I've lost this person as I knew them, my role with them, and my identity reflected off of them, etc. The third, and I'm not judging, not being condemning here, self-pity. There is an aspect of woe is me. Look at this horrible tragedy that I'm experiencing. I just lost my whatever loved one, etc. And there is an aspect of that. But I think that the reason why that's important is to remember. I have a friend in Hawaii who's a Hawaiian priest. He's a kahuna. And when my girlfriend died, I cannot express to you, and let that suffice, the pain and agony and my inability to process through that for the first 5 years. Okay. But he said something to me that I was in such a state of brokenness that I just had to say, thank you. I received that, understanding that I can't do much with it at this moment, but that I know in the future I can see that I will. So I'm going to put that right over here. And what he said to me was, he said, Brian, do you know it's very serious how profoundly you're grieving? Because did you know that if you grieve to a point like beyond despair, you can hold her back? What? how I'm handling her death can be affecting her now? Yes, absolutely, Brian. You need to know that. And I'll tell you what, it knocked me into shape as much as I was able at that point. Okay, what I should say is it changed the trajectory of my processing through her death to you got to pull yourself together because you're pulling her down. She can't go on
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
how much she loved you, seeing you agonizing, and I
Yeah.
never agonized. I didn't know that hell would have been another floor up from where I was, okay, on the elevator. So when he showed me that aspect, I had never known that. And it was like, oh, and the first thing I did was, I'm so sorry. I didn't understand that I could still be affecting your ascension into the next, and all that. And one more quote that Brother Bruce, love you, Brother Bruce. I miss him. What a friend. He passed on the same month that my spirit owl came to me. And I've always wondered if there was a connection. He said to me, you may not understand this now, but the Hindus believe that one of the best gifts anyone can ever give you is their death. And the moment he said that to me, Kiara, I have to tell you, it's not what I wanted to hear. It was not it was not pleasant in the space that I was in, the hell that I was experiencing. But I did the same thing. And I told him, I said, I'm not ready to hear that right now, but I'll keep it in my pocket and I'll look at it again another day. I promise you. And I came to gradually, through my own processing, through her death, understand that not only was her loving me a gift, because she was an absolute bodhisattva, an absolute angel. She didn't need to be here much. Couldn't believe she picked me, to be honest with you, because I was so far behind her where she was. But not only was her choosing to love me an inexpressible gift, but her life itself was a gift to me. And her death was a gift to me
Yeah.
that I took time to understand it.
Yeah.
But her death was a gift to me. And when the self-pity part had run its course and I had understood it and seen it in a different way, thanks to Kahu.
Mm.
And when I was able to reflect on what Brother Bruce said to me, these things began to make more sense. I could piece together a path through. And I would just tell people again that the worst of all of them is the regret. So do it and express it and give it now. Give them the
Totally.
flowers now
Mm.
instead of draping them on their gravestone, metaphorically speaking, or literally if you choose.
And remember also that, um, if you're expecting that everything that ever wanted to be said or everything that ever wanted to be done was pure and complete, that's
Yeah.
not going to be. So that,
Yeah.
some level of forgiveness, self-forgiveness is also
Oh,
essential.
it's a much needed balm for the soul. And I'll add that the things that you are lamenting, shoulda, woulda, coulda,
Mm.
they know.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of until you're done beating yourself up over it, you'll
Mm.
reach a point where you can see and receive the fact that they have received it. And by
Yeah.
the way, they can still receive it, just not in the form that you knew before, but you can still love them. In
Mm.
some ways, in some instances, they may come back and be with you at some I can't tell people that that absolutely will happen, and sometimes it happens and you don't know it, and sometimes it happens and believe me, you do know it. I woke up many mornings with the first awareness on my mind, knowing that I had visited her, we had been together. I remember sitting in a stone stairwell with her. I remember she was there. I would wake up with her fresh on me. Her essence was fresh upon me. I knew we had communed while my body slept, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And And I can't promise that experience. And there's more that I'm going to keep to myself. But they do receive it, and they're
Oh,
not
yes.
gone. There's no time
No,
and space and
no.
distance and separation.
Well, I'll just um, state what we wrote on my father's gravestone when he
Okay.
died. This was a quote from Rumi, and it says, "On the day that I die, when I'm being carried to the grave, weep not. The sun sets and the moon sets, but they're not gone." And I think it's what you're talking about. They're not gone.
Yeah.
It's We think they're gone because our senses are limited to what our blind vision
Yeah.
and a blinder audience can perceive.
I,
But once we
I,
break out of that limitation,
yeah, that's it. I love what Chief Seattle said. Death is a changing of worlds.
yeah,
You've left one room, you've entered the other. Do you
mm,
not exist anymore because in that room you're not there anymore? That's see what we call death is on our side, those who are still incarnate. We call that death, and what we mean is ending. Well, that's an illusion and that's a misnomer. We've covered all that. In the Sufi tradition and also in the Orthodox Christian tradition, I've seen it taught in both, and I love it. There's a saying that basically says you need to die before you die so that when you die you don't die. And
I
that
like
has to do with
that.
these sheddings and these dark nights of the soul, the shedding off of all that is not you, that no longer serves you, that has run its course and that you have outgrown.
Mm,
You need to die before you die so when you die you don't die. That kind of thing. you know in other
beautiful.
words, you are a continuing unfolding of being, but don't resist it. Flow with it, embrace it and love it if possible, but flow with it even when it hurts, and it will sometimes.
Mm,
So
yeah,
Kiara,
beautiful.
a wonderful closing thought or a pearl of wisdom from you before we wrap up this wonderful conversation, which I thank you for.
Mm. Yeah, well, I would say to close that, we've spoken about death as something that affects us personally, but we're going through a time where we're going through a deathing on a very extensive collective level, and we see signs of this everywhere
Grand
in our
scale.
culture, in our,
Yeah.
on a grand scale, in our political, economic systems. I mean, what's going to happen in the next year or next 6 months in most global economies is going to be equivalent to a deathing. I'm not going to go into the politics of it, but this is something we're facing. But not to see it as something necessarily bad, to see it as a dark night, to see it as an opportunity for opening to something yet unknown, which could be vastly beautiful. We are going through a cocooning, like you said.
Mm.
We're entering into a butterfly phase of humanity for Mother Earth, which we can only actually fully understand once we're through it, once we're on the other side and looking back in retrospect.
Right. Hindsight, retrospect.
Yeah. Yeah. So just trust that wherever we are at, with all the chaos and craziness, all the brutality and violence, all the wars and illusions, all the fear that comes up for so many, we aren't on the other side yet. And once we do get there, we'll understand more fully. And meanwhile, just trust, let go, flow, and know that things are moving in a good direction. How else could it be?
It might sound a little oversimplified to say that, and yet it's spot on, sound and wise advice, which after a certain amount of experiential accumulation, you come to realize, well, I don't know a whole lot of things,
Mm,
and I don't need to know a whole lot of them either. And I'm not gonna know a whole lot of them also. Um, and that whole wormhole of, and I also know that there's a lot that I don't know, and all, but it's what's important is that I trust,
mm,
flow, abide, discern, respond, and transcend, all in a pattern as things come. Now, doesn't I didn't just say I can do all that perfectly every time.
to the best of your ability,
The
and
best
you
you can
can
do where you're at with what you've got, with what you
mm,
face, okay? But constantly try to keep that as
guiding
your guiding,
post.
your GPS point, your destination, your guiding light, your beacon.
Mm,
Because yeah, I agree with you. I believe that there are some tough times ahead. I don't know what lies on the other side. I don't know for sure what's coming. We talked a lot about, we used the word cocooning quite a bit tonight. There's also a little bit of forging in the furnace going on too. I think that we're getting little doses of the poison to help build up the immunity, so to speak, like they do with horses. They give it a little bit of the snake venom and a little bit more and a little bit more, and it builds up an immunity to the snake bite. Well, I think that a lot of us could relate and identify some things in our life that we may be experiencing right now. I know I am, where, that's kind of like getting a little bit of that venom right now, so that I can be prepared, immune to when it really hits, so to speak. Here's a little bit of a pinprick now, so that when the blade slices, you don't bleed that much, that kind of thing.
mm,
Well, bad example, but you know what I mean. And so, yeah, we don't know exactly what's coming, but I think we all sense big changes are
yeah,
underway,
yeah.
now, not heading down the pike, but underway. Um, and so there are aspects of us and our lives that will die off. And some of them will be what we call a dark night of the soul. Some of them will feel like a cocooning. Some of them will feel like total confusion. I think it's important
Yeah,
as
and some
we
of it will feel like you're literally peeling your skin off.
Yeah, and I think it's what's
Incredibly
important is that
painful.
we learn to abide and in restful trust through
Mm,
those
yeah,
things. At least it will
yeah,
help while we process through.
right.
So, uh, brother, I thank you again so much for your presence and your sharing. And you can hear the Romeo
Oh,
outside now, who
mm.
is looking for his ladies. So we welcome Romeo into the show tonight. And I bless you. And as always, I thank you for blessing me and blessing all
Mm,
of us who have come here to share in these topics and learn from each other. And I hope that everything that you and I have shared is meaningful and useful and helpful and valuable to everyone who has taken in this conversation with us. Thank you.
mm. Thank you, brother.